Today's plugin is nothing like you're used to play with. This is Factorsynth. By the way, I'm going to announce a contest with a lot of great prizes, so if you don't want to miss that, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It defines itself as a spectral deconstructing plugin. That means it will take a sound and separate it into different components. Think something similar like stem separation. For instance, if we load up a drum loop, it will create different layers with the hi-hats, the snare, the kicks, and so on, or at least it will try to make the best separation possible. Of course, all of that depends on different settings, especially the number of components that you want to separate the sound by. With these controls, you can do simple stuff like panning the different sounds or apply time shifting to them. So with this, you can take a drum loop and transform it into another rhythm. Of course, you can take a sound that was originally mono, and thanks to the panning of the different components, you can transform it into something that's stereo without losing too much of the original quality. We can also use this to take a sound that's made by different other sounds. Again, with a drum loop is easier to explain. And export it into multiple tracks. So now from one original WAV file, we have all the tracks of our drum. Of course, there's going to be bleeding, and that's okay, but the thing I wanted to show you is that now we can apply, for instance, a very long and lush reverb only to the snare tracks. That way we avoid having to try and EQ out the low frequencies and even the kick from the original sound. I mean, we are not even hearing the top end of the kick when we apply this reverb. And of course, we can use the same logic to use any other effect that we want. This works great for percussions and also for some melodies. Now you see that at the right we have this dotted grid. By oversimplifying it, I can say that it takes the original timing and amplitude of one of these components and applies into that the timbre of the components that are here at the top. Now on both axes we have the same components, so by using this diagonal line you will have the original sound. With this, you can also hear that it separates the components in the frequency spectrum. So at the top left, we will have the higher frequencies with the hi-hats and some ambience and whatnot. And at the bottom, we will have the stop frequencies with the body of the kick or maybe even the snare. Now, thanks to this grid, we can apply the timbre of one or other sound to the amplitude and timing of another. You just have to look how you are mapping this. For instance, if we activate this dot at the bottom left, we are going to make it so the high frequency timbre will have the low frequency amplitude and rhythm. In other words, we will have the rhythm of the kick, but the sound of the hi-hat. I will be uploading samples of my experiments with Factorsynth to my Patreon and members pages. I have plenty of other sounds and presets there, so definitely consider joining one of those to support my content. Thank you. Now on drums, you can identify the different components of the sound. So let's actually experiment with other kinds of samples like vocals or synthesizers on guitars or whatever else.
I just wanna love like this. I just wanna love like this. I just wanna love like this.
great thing is that you can actually export and even drag and drop the resulting sound into your project. You can export individual components or the whole sound. So for instance, we can have a drum loop and use the same drum loop to create some sort of percussion. We change the timbres and the timing, and then we listen to those together. We can experiment the same, I don't know, for instance, with this arpeggio. So you see, this is to take samples and loops and transform them into something very different. But you can see that we also have a second grid, which is called the Xsynth. Thing is, on this pink loader, we can again load another sound, but it's only going to be divided on timbre. Then this works almost the same as the blue grid, which means the timbre of the second sample will have the rhythm, timing, and whatever else of the first sample. For instance, let's take this drum loop and apply a vocal to Xsynth.
I just wanna love like this.
Thanks to this grid, again, you can apply different timbres of the different sections to different components of the original sample. I mean, in this case, different sections of the vocals into different parts of the drums. So that way we are creating different textures by combining two very different sounds. Thanks to this architecture, you can actually use anything you want. For instance, I have this drum loop in a song. But I want to use another drum loop to create some vocal textures. So I create something different and import it into the main part of Factorsynth. The only important thing is that to get easier to manage results, you have to keep the same tempo. I can go even crazier by changing the panning and also changing the timing of the different components. And now, again, I choose a vocal and apply it to the Xsynth. Then I just activate the dots corresponding to the Xsynth, and thanks to that, now I have this rhythmic vocal texture. I drag it and drop it into my project, and as you can hear, it works perfectly. So I gotta say, I'm fascinated by how this synth works. I mean, it's a new approach for sound design, so you can create very different sounds from samples that you got. Thank you so much for watching, I will see you next time, and bye bye.